Welcome, everybody, to the Baseball Blueprint Podcast, your home for all things player development, where we highlight some of the best instructors in the game of baseball. Today, we are pleased to welcome Diamyn Hall. He is a mental game and performance expert. He is working with the Baltimore Orioles at the moment. Diamyn, it's great to have you on the show.
Man, great to be here. Excited to have a great conversation today.
Man, this is an underappreciated and under talked about aspect of our game that plays a huge role, especially as levels climb. Right, it's a big separator. So diving right in here, Diamyn. What led you down this path of focusing deeper into the mental game and kind of taking you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I guess it started when I was 14. So it was a running back, played football my whole life, and then dove head first for a loose fumble. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Um, ended up going head on with somebody, and I was paralyzed from my neck down. And it was a totally crazy and wild moment for me because at the age of 14 you usually don't experience things like that. So in that moment I remember staring at the sky, and one of my teammates, Ryan Bayer, he was looking over at me, and he comes over and he's like, Tommy, get up, Tommy, get up. And I remember looking back at him and saying, hey, like, I can't move. And I remember like his eyes started to well up and tears started to come down his face, because we both realized in that moment that I was paralyzed. And luckily, 24 hours later, got to the hospital, all of the things, and ended up getting my feeling back. Now, I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember going to the doctors, the doctors coming in and being like, hey, Diamond, we got good news for you. We got bad news for you. Good news is you're walking. Bad news is we can't clear you to play the game of football. And I'm like, Doc, what do you mean? What do you mean I can't play the game of football anymore? Like, I put all my time, all my effort, all my energy into this game. I get here earlier than everybody. I stay later than everybody. I study more film than everybody. Like, Ohio State was just at that game 2 days ago. Like, I'm supposed to get to the NFL, all of the things, so I can take care of my family. You can't sit here and tell me that I can't play this game anymore. He was like, listen, man, like, I'm just doing my job. If we cleared you to play and something happened, that would be on me, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, it wasn't cleared to play football. And I remember going through this 2 month time span where I was like, I was searching. I was scuffling, because what I realized later on was essentially I had lost a huge part of my identity, because if you would have had a conversation with that person with Diamond, he would have told you, like, I'm a football player. And so went through that time frame, ended up picking up the game of baseball. Had the physical ability, all of the things, five tools, but it was tough playing catch up. I'm 14 years old. Everybody else has been playing their whole lives, and I've got to find a way to catch up skill wise. And I remember after a practice, one of my teammates, Ryan Barnett, he gave me a book called Heads Up Baseball, written by Dr. Ken Ravizza and Dr. Tom Hansen. And that book totally changed my life. Now, before this, I wasn't a big reader, but that was the book that made my bookshelf go from one to thousands. Like, that was the book that allowed me to realize, like, how important, especially in the game of baseball, how important the mental side is. Like, it was the first time somebody had packaged it up in a way where I could understand it, where I could read it, and then I can put those things into practice the very next day. So that became like, I was like, oh, this is what's going to give me the competitive advantage over all of my peers, no matter how long they've been playing. Like, this is what's going to allow me to be better than everybody else. And so the bookshelf started to grow. 2 years later, ended up getting a scholarship to Lincoln Trail University, Lincoln Trail Community College in Robinson, Illinois, and came across a great head coach there, Kevin Bowers, who gave me a book called The Mental Side of Baseball. I think it was Harvey Dorfman. It's got like three baseballs.
Yeah, I know. Is it the mental ABCs of hitting or something like that?
Yeah, it was the mental
It's,
ABCs
it's
of
so
hitting.
funny. We go through Dorfman's kind of library during Vanderbilt prospect camps. I know exactly what book you're talking about. We go chapter by chapter each day. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about. It's good stuff, man.
that book also took my game to another level. So when I look back at my career, it was I was already a hard worker, already would outwork, outcompete all of the things, but being able to get that edge and learn the basics, the fundamentals of the mental side of baseball totally changed my game. And at the time, I didn't know At the time, I didn't know it would end up being what I did for my career, but I knew in the back of my mind, like after my career is over, I want to do something along these lines. Like I want to be able to teach this. Like I shouldn't be the only person on every team that I'm on, whether it's summer ball, whether it's my school's team. I shouldn't be the only person like passionate and knowing about this side of the game. So ended up playing 2 years at Lincoln Trail, then went to Grambling State University, where my head coach at the time, James Cooper, he's now a manager within the Yankees organization. He introduced me to what Relentless. It was Relentless by Tim Grover, and Body Mind Mastery by Dan Millman. Dan Millman was a guy who Phil Jackson would bring in to work with the Bulls when Michael Jordan was on that team. And so when people are like, "Man, Michael Jordan's mental game, like it's crazy, it's unbelievable." Like Phil Jackson was the guy that introduced him to that side of the game, which is unbelievable to even think about. When you mix that relentless pursuit of excellence with the calmness and poise that Dan Millman brought into the picture, and that Phil Jackson was great at teaching. I mean, that's when you get the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants. So yeah, so after I finished up at Grambling State, ended up finishing up my career at Georgia Southwestern State, ended up becoming like a player coach, and after I finished there, jumped on staff at Wright State as the director of peak performance and mental conditioning. Was there for about a year and a half, and then jumped off staff because I got to a point where I was like, look, I've got to teach this to the rest of the world. Like we're doing a great job here at Wright State with coaching our guys up on this when it comes to the mental side of the game, but I've got to share this with the rest of the world. And so rewind back to when I first got on staff at Wright State. Jeff Mercer he was the pioneer of my whole career. He's the reason why I'm here, because he saw my potential and he was like, look, let's do something that's never been done before. Let's bring you on as a full time guy. First guy in college baseball history, Division I history, to be just focusing on this side of the game. And he was like, but the nuances of what I want you to do is I want you to reverse engineer all of the systems that we create when it comes to the mental side of the game around three things. He said, I want us to win championships. He said, number two, I want our guys to get drafted. And then he said, number three, I want our guys to be the most mentally tough team, not only in our conference, but in the country. He's like, everybody else has got all of these resources, but this is going to be our separator. So I reverse engineered all of the systems, all of the curriculum around those three things, which is very rare for somebody to do in our industry. And I also think he was the reason why I built that skill set of like thinking through, like, okay, if I'm going to teach this specific mental skill, how do I reverse engineer from these three things? Number one, winning a championship. Number two, getting our guys drafted. Number three, making them the most mentally tough competitors in all of college baseball. So that was the framing. And I give so much credit to him for number one, believing in me, for number two, for where I've gotten to in my career, because he was such a great leader. I was able to see how he led on a day-to-day basis, and it played such a role in who I ended up becoming as a leader throughout the rest of my career. So was there, and then after that, stepped off staff, created a book, created an online course, and then I figured out that something was missing during that time frame, doing all the virtual coaching. I was like, man, there's something missing that I had at Wright State that I don't have now. I'm making a lot more money. I can travel the world, all of the things, but something's still missing that I know I need. I didn't know what it was. And I found out what it was when I was able to put my thumb on it. It was being able to coach and develop guys in person, be in the trenches. Like that for me is what I enjoy the most at Wright State, like the day-to-day coaching and development. And once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I got to make this change. And jumped on staff at ING as a leadership coach. And then that's when, came across the one and only Dave Turgeon, and learned so much from him, learned so much from Dan Simons as well, and everybody that was a part of that program. Built a great relationship with Turgeon. And then, he was very similar to Mercer in what he wanted me to reverse engineer from. Like at ING, like we had to go 25-0 to win a national championship. Like we didn't get to compete in the state championship tournament, anything along. Like we had to win out the whole year, which is hard. So one of the themes that we came up with was um, was championship habits, championship behaviors. So every day we had to show up as though it was a championship day because it was. Like we couldn't take any days off, not in the fall, not in January, not in football. Like we couldn't take any days off. Every single day, the questions and behaviors that we looked for were: did we have a championship practice? Did this guy bring championship level intensity today on the mat? Did he have championship level composure in that pressure situation? If not, Diamond, go fix it. So he was somebody who, I mean, he ran a tight ship, and he was someone who I also learned a lot about leadership from, and how to share the vision across the coaching staff, get everybody on board, and then how to think ahead. He was a very strategic, and he is a very strategic thinker. He plays chess when it comes to leading the pack.
Yeah.
Whereas other coaches, they're playing checkers. Like Turge is thinking 10, 15 steps ahead with everything that he does and everything that we did during that time working together and being able to work under him. And so that first year we didn't win a national championship. Now on paper we should have. On paper we should have. We had all the prospects, all the big names. But we went back to the drawing board after the year was up in each one of our areas as far as the coaching staff and even on my end, like what can I do differently next year when it comes to this side of the game to set our guys up for success next year to where we put ourselves in a position to win a national championship. And so Turge and I were always in constant collaboration and communication when it came to that. And then the next year, my second year there, we ended up winning it. And man, I remember something I'll never forget that Turge always used to say was that it's going to take all of us in order to win a national championship. Like everybody on the staff, it's going to take all the way from our athletic trainer, our nutrition coach, our mental conditioning coach, our leadership coach, our hitting coach, our pitching coach, everybody who's involved, our strength and conditioning coach, everybody who's involved in this game, in this journey of winning a national championship, it's going to take all of us. And that was one of the messages that he repeated every single day, and everybody got on board, and we found a way to do it. But learned so much from Turch. So grateful that our paths crossed, and I got the opportunity to work under him. And then a year ago, around this time frame, got a call from the Orioles and went through this process, and then just finished up the first year with the Orioles this past year. So now we're here.
That's awesome, man. What a journey. I mean,
Man,
some of the groups and the individuals you worked with. I mean, the Cooper Lovelady coaching tree at Wright State. I mean, these guys are going everywhere. I mean, isn't that incredible? So
yep,
awesome, man. So as you're bouncing from level to level, right, and you get these really cool experience because these are elite athletes at each level. Are you seeing
yeah.
any common areas of focus that you need to really hunt in terms of like developing that mental side of the game?
Yeah, so we've got. I'm not at liberty to share with you the like all of the key skills that we
Yeah.
focus on, but I'll be able to dabble in a few that if any of our competitors listen to this, they won't be able to figure out
Yep.
exactly how we do what we're focusing on. But one of the themes that I've seen across all of professional baseball that is important that also relates to what we do. So one of the big things that we focus on is development, right? Development. And for me, inside of that conversation of developing the mental skills within our guys, it's developing them to, it's very similar to what I learned at Wright State with Jeff and what we were able to pull off at IMG with Turge. It's reverse engineering what do championship mental skills look like, sound like, feel like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis? And I would say the number one thing that I think, and this is across professional baseball, that that matters and that gives guys a competitive advantage is their inner coach. What do I mean by inner coach? Some people call it self-talk. I like to call it your inner coach because it's we have 70,000 thoughts a day. And if you think about that, we have to construct our realities inside of our minds to be able to work to our advantage when it comes to the things that we're saying to ourselves. So thoughts come in three primary forms. Number one, questions. Number two, statements. Number three, images. So QSI. Questions, statements, images. Now, what are questions? Questions are thoughts that thoughts that seek information or clarity. Statements are thoughts that declare or conclude. Images are thoughts that create visual representations of ideas or scenarios. Now, the best of the best, the Ohtanis, all three of those work to his advantage, as though it were an actual coach. Like, so what do I mean by this when I say inner coach? When you think about the things that you say to yourself, that is yourself coaching you.
Mhm.
My question to any player who's listening right now is: would you fire or hire your inner coach? Like the things that you say to yourself,
Yeah.
do they work to your competitive advantage? The images that you see, do they work to your competitive advantage? The statements that you make in your mind after you strike out, do they work to your competitive advantage? If not, then we've got some work to do. If so, great, because that's what the $700 million man is absolutely excellent. His inner coach is a $700 million inner coach, which means what's going on in his mind after he strikes out, it's all working to his advantage to give him a competitive advantage for his next at bat. If you don't know who I'm talking about, I'm talking about Ohtani,
Yeah.
right? Like
So good.
the best of the best. If you were able to take their thoughts and put them on a whiteboard, you'd be able to see nothing but unproductive questions, statements, and images. Guys who are average, they'll have average questions, statements, and images running through their heads consistently. And so the goal is to, from an inner coach standpoint, the goal is to develop a 700. If you want to be at the level that Otani's at, is to develop a $700 million inner coach.
That's so good. Wow, dude. That makes so
Yeah,
much sense too. You look at, especially in moments of failure with younger players, like that inner coach is often the voice of your parents or your teachers or whoever's giving you instruction as you're being raised. So a lot of that has to do with the way you were nurtured growing up. But man,
yep,
that can be negative and that can be detrimental often, right? And so you see these high performers and um, it's so good. You talk about these guys at really high levels.
yep,
That's a huge separator. That's a huge separator. Being able to like, it's almost like hitting a reset button. Like, what can I do to get myself back into a space where I can compete at the highest level? Because you don't have
yep.
time to take a pitch off anymore, right? That's so good. Wow.
And to your point, the higher you go, the more each pitch matters. Therefore, the time in between pitches, that's when your thoughts are running. That's when you have to make sure your thoughts are working to your competitive advantage, because that's when at bats are won and lost. It's not the actual pitch; it's the time in between pitches, because that's when your brain is setting your body up to do whatever it was just talking about before you stepped in the box. Now, if you take a pitch down the middle, you're like, oh man, I should have hit that, or this or that, and you're asking like unproductive questions to yourself or saying unproductive things to yourself, then you're going to get back in the box with that same energy. You're going to get back in the box with those same thoughts, and more often than not, where your body is always going to follow your mind, but more often than not, then that's not going to set you up for success. We've got to train your mind to work to your advantage, specifically during the time in between pitches and and more importantly, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best of the best in any industry, their inner coach is elite. You look at the difference between Tom Brady and Cam Newton. That wasn't physical. It was not a physical. It wasn't a physical difference. Physically, Cam Newton compared to Tom, like, so what was the difference? Oh, when you go back and you study Tom Brady's career, when he was at Michigan, he came across a guy who coached him up on the mental side of the game. He talks about it in so many different interviews, and he learned all of these different skills from a mental standpoint that he amplified and used on a day-to-day basis that helped him to go from being a guy that was on the bench to being a guy who was a starter. And then a guy who was drafted after all of these people, and then now he's a Hall of Famer. Now he's the best of the best. It wasn't a physical difference. It's not a physical difference when you compare Tom Brady and other quarterbacks. It's all up top.
That's so good. Wow, man. And I think when it comes down to it, and the experience that I have is mainly at the collegiate level,
Yeah,
but groups with high performing coaches who have held longevity and success in their tenure, they often talk about the challenge of trying to keep their guys confident in a game that's packed with so much failure.
yeah,
what's been the biggest separator when you see a professional type player versus a younger player when it comes to their confidence?
I would say it's the inner coach. The inner coach is
Really?
the
Okay.
number one dictator of somebody's confidence.
I love it.
What they're saying to themselves is when you see a guy like Trout, or a guy like let's go Mookie Betts, or a guy like Freddie Freeman. When those guys strike out, if you took a video and you watch them going back to the dugout, like they're not doing what most younger guys are doing, which is like they're not doing that. They're thinking productively in their mind. Okay, this guy just beat me by doing this. They're problem solving in their head to prepare themselves for the next at bat as soon as it's over. You might see a little bit of frustration here and there because that's the biggest stage, but it doesn't last long. So what that's called also is bounce back speed. Your ability to face adversity and then bounce back to baseline as quickly as possible. That's also something that the higher you go, the shorter the bounce back speed. Meaning a guy can face adversity during a game if he's a big leaguer, and it might take him zero point 0.2 seconds to just totally flush it and then be focused on the present moment, like right away. Like versus even in college, it might take a guy 5 to 6 minutes. Like, but that 5 to 6 minutes that it takes for them to get back to baseline, Ohtani is already back to baseline in 5 to 6 seconds.
Mhm.
Therefore, his brain for those 5 minutes, he's used those to his advantage. I mean, we have from a hitter standpoint, we have what between each at bat, maybe 30, 40 minutes. You've got to use those 30, 40 minutes to your advantage. Remember that thoughts that you have, there are three primary forms. You've got questions, statements, images. The images that you create. This is why people talk about visualization and how it's so important, because it is. There was a video of Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts talking about how he visualizes himself before every single game getting 40 to 50 at bats.
Wow.
40 to 50 at bats. That makes sense now. That's why he hits 300 in the big leagues, because he's every opportunity that he gets, he's preparing his subconscious mind to do what he wants it to do whenever he gets in the moment. Everything that we do, everything that happens in reality happens in our minds first. The difference is who's going to use that to their advantage and who's not. The guys who use it are the guys that you see making crazy deals, signing crazy contracts, and putting up crazy numbers year after year. Burns is another great example. I mean, he leverages the journey. There are so many examples, but when you study, if you're listening to this right now, I want you to think about who your favorite player is. Just take yourself down a rabbit hole of researching what they do when it comes to their mental game. Everybody does something different. Every guy, different mental skills matter more. It just depends on who you are. But study your favorite players. Study your favorite players in not just the game of baseball, but across all sports. And what you'll find is a common theme. The common theme that you'll find is the most mentally tough guys are not the most mentally tough guys by accident.
Wow, that's powerful. I like that, man. That's so good. I think as players, we have the idea of what we want to be, right? And as we
Yeah,
grow, we have this idea of how this development we want it to look, but you don't really know what you feel until you feel it, right? And this is far easier said than done type stuff. This is stuff that takes reps and preparation and practice. And for those guys listening, if you can, make sure you're checking out Diamond's work here, because it is some special stuff. You'll have access to his social media, his website through the Baseball Blue Book app. It's free. Make sure you take a look at that. Download it if you're players, coaches. It's some really incredible stuff, and make sure you check out his book and really get a good look at what this guy does, because it's game changing stuff. Now, Diamond, veering off
yeah,
course just slightly here, because this is something that doesn't get addressed much.
yeah.
Looking at the coaching side now, we
Mm,
talk about addressing the mental game of players often.
yeah,
There's a large amount of coaches who preach this, and guilty, me being right here, right?
yeah,
We don't practice it the same way
yeah,
we're expecting our players to, but it is as important, if not way more important, that
yeah,
we handle this ourselves, right?
yeah. I think anytime you are leading a group of people and you want them to do something, make sure that you also do it too. Make sure that you also practice it as much as you want them to practice it. For example, For me as a mental performer, that's the standard I hold myself to. There are other mental performance coaches who are in my industry who talk about different things. Oh yeah, you should meditate every day, but then they don't meditate at all. For me, anything that I teach, I've got to do a self check first. Like before I go out and I teach this, do I do this on a day to day basis? If so, perfect. Let me write this down. This is what we're gonna. And so, even when I learn something new, before I go and teach it, I've got to make sure I put it into practice myself because there's a different level of conviction that comes out when you do it too.
Yeah.
And so if you know there's a skill that you want if you know there's a mental skill that you want your team to master, whether it be composure, whether it be focus, whether it be resilience, you have to find a way to strategically show them that you practice it, but most importantly, you're decent with it as well, so that they have a visual example of what to learn from. So, what example can I use here? I'll use Turge as an example. He wanted our guys to develop their leadership skills. And that was a part of my responsibility. And when he would talk about it to our players, they had a visual representation of what a good quality leader looked like every single day, within every single moment, and what it sounded like, what it looked like, what it looked. So you have to become what you teach.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You've got coaches who talk about, look, I want my guys to be composed, and then you know exactly where I'm going.
Yep.
You know exactly where I'm going. And then a moment comes within the game where they lose their composure, and they've been talking about composure all week. Now everybody in the dugout, it's like what's understood doesn't have to be said. Now everybody in the dugout looks down at their coach and they see him lose his composure. Now all of your credibility goes out of the window. Now that's just how humans work.
Mm-hmm.
So if we know that we want our team, and it's interesting when you really study the best of the best teams, they have incredibly great coaches. The Phil Jacksons, the who's Tom Brady's coach?
Yeah, Belichick, the Belichick tree. Yeah.
Belichick, like these guys,
Yeah, man.
they practice what they preached, and they preach what they practice. From a coaching standpoint, I think that is the number one thing that I've noticed being around some of the best coaches on the planet is that the things that they want their guys to get good at when it comes to leadership, when it comes to mental skills, more often than not, they are really they're skilled with those things, but they understand those things to a T. And then they put the right resources and the extra coaches around themselves, whether it's a mental performance coach, whether it's a leadership coach, to reinforce the messages in a different way. I think, man, Mercer was so good at this too. You talk about toughness. You know, one of the things that he always wanted his guys to be, and our guys to be at Wright State, was tough. You look down at the end of the dugout. Mercer demonstrated toughness on a day-to-day basis. Like you were able to see what it looked like, which was a big piece as to why our guys were so tough at Wright State.
Yeah, and that guy too. I remember I was a freshman in college playing at Sinclair, which was right by Wright State. I had been living with a couple of Wright State players at the time because I played summer ball with them, and we were hitting it at the field late night, and Mercer was there. I didn't know who he was because I wasn't involved with the program at all, but we were hitting. He was there, and I remember him watching, and he was just laser focused, zeroed in, watching us work. And I remember thinking, like, that guy looks like a mean dude. And then I go up and talk to him, and he was so nice, and he was so giving, and the thoughts were so powerful when it comes to like, hey, how do I climb the ladder, right? How do I get the next level? This is a guy who I then had to compete against for the next 3 years, and I knew what that energy was, right? So I knew, hey, Wright State week's coming up, we better lock in. This is going to be a tough group. And so to kind of piggyback off your point, like having that role model was so powerful, right? And so for those coaches listening, finding a way to be yourself and finding ways to lead with passion and to practice what you preach is so important for the buy-in aspect, for the relationship building aspect, and for maintaining the positive culture and performance of your group. And so, Diamyn, we'll leave on this one here. 3 things that you could say to the coaching world to kind of lead them along the right path in terms of understanding the mental game better, how to use it better, things like that.
Yeah, I would say the first thing would be if you haven't already, buy Heads Up Baseball, the first one, for your whole staff,
Mm-hmm.
and then for everybody on your roster. Hand it out.
Ditto. Yep, agreed.
And, and walk everybody through it. Go week by week, each chapter, and that'll be number one. That's the lowest hanging fruit, to be honest.
Yep.
Um, Number two, feel free to reach out to me and ask any questions that you have when it comes to the mental side of the game. I would say number three, um, and many coaches have probably heard this, but I'm still going to reinforce it. We talk about how important the mental side of the game is, but we've got to look at the percentages of how much we're actually working on it. If we know, and something that you say as a coach is, hey, the game is 90% mental, 10% physical, and then I look at your practice outline, and you've got 90% of it is just physical tasking. You're not weaving in any mental conditioning messages in there. Then we've got to restructure what the practice plan looks like, in a way that weaves in the mental skills, in a way that weaves in the leadership skills, in a way that connects your players with each other, so you can build the best culture that you can possibly build. And hopefully you're a championship coach if you're listening, and help your guys win a championship in whatever capacity that is.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, if you didn't get a takeaway from this episode, you're nuts. This has been so good. Diamyn, thank you so much for being here. Special shout out to the Baseball Blue Book Network for partnering with the show. Shout out Valley Sporting Goods for sponsoring yet again another episode. You guys have been awesome. And Diamyn, we appreciate you being on, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I've said this before, but selfishly, I just get so much out of these episodes, and this is no exception. This has been fantastic for me.
Appreciate you for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, listeners, and we will see you next time.